Hey guys, what's up? It's Drew here today, and in this video what we're going to be taking a look at is, in my opinion, one of the best hand cannons to be using with controller, if not the best hand cannon to be using with controller if you're interested in hand cannons. And it's not limited to controller, of course, it just has some really good traits and perks that make it more effective and reliable in my experience with controller than some other hand cannons. But for you mouse and keyboard users out there as well, this is just an overall great hand cannon that you might want to look into. So you guys might be a little surprised, but this is actually one of the rare weapons. It's the Allegro-34 hand cannon. Now before we start, I'm quickly going to say that this hand cannon, as much as it is more effective and more consistent in my experience, and I'll explain why later with controller, it's not all of a sudden going to be a weapon that you can just dominate at any point in the map with and just run around as your main weapon and shoot people from across the map with no problem and have no bloom. It's not going to be like that, but I think it's a great weapon, so let's start talking about why it is. First, as always, let's start with the archetype of the weapon. It's an adaptive hand cannon, which means it shoots 140 rounds per minute and has 84 impact. It's got an optimal time to kill of 1.3 seconds, taking 1 crit and 3 body shots until 6 resilience. Any point with their 6 resilience or past that, it's going to take 2 crit and then 2 body. It's got a 1.73 base time to kill though, taking 5 body shots. It deals 61 crit damage and 45 body damage. Moving on to perks, in terms of our sights, we have the Steady Hand HCS available, which is increased stability and handling, and on the other side of things, we got the True Sight HCS, which is slight increases to range, stability, and handling. Out of the two, I tend to prefer Steady Hand if you're using a controller. For mouse and keyboard users, I'd say you can go with True Sight. I'll explain my choices a little later on further in the video when we talk about the stability of the weapon. The main thing about this weapon though, in terms of perks to talk about, are 2 particular perks that are pretty influential. We have ricochet rounds and opening shot. Ricochet rounds allows bullets to ricochet off of hard surfaces, and it increases stability and says it gives a slight range increase. That being said, in a past video, I took a look at ricochet rounds and found that they maintain damage at range or extended range even more so than other range increasing perks. So it actually gives a lot more range than a slight increase. It gave a considerable amount more sustainability to damage at range. In my past video looking at ricochet rounds specifically, I tested ricochet rounds on different weapons and found pretty consistent results. It seemed as though ricochet rounds maintain damage at range even better than a lot of range increasing perks. For the relevance to this video here, an Allegro with max stability and ricochet rounds and a range stat of 45 with these perks on still had a few more meters of range than a Minuet using a max range with a stat of 54. This means that ricochet rounds is still better than approximately 10 points of range on the stat bar in terms of at least raw damage output alone. A friend of mine that's part of the Destiny Massive Breakdown podcast named Monks did some further testing and research of ricochet rounds and found that ricochet rounds increases the max range or damage fall off end, and as a result likely increases the zoom of the weapon. Now if this is true, this would certainly make sense first of all, and mean that ricochet rounds is providing a similar type of effect as rangefinder did in Destiny 1. Of course, rangefinder is not a perk that's present in Destiny 2. Next, let's talk about opening shot quickly. So opening shot increases your accuracy and range on the opening shot of an attack. Now what does this mean? You're going to get a tighter accuracy cone on the initial shot leading into an engagement. On a very basic level, an accuracy cone is basically the area that your bullets have a chance to land at. However, this expands at certain ranges. So the farther the target, the farther away you are from a surface or a target that you're shooting at, the more wider area your bullet has a chance to hit. Obviously, within your optimal range, you're usually going to be pinpoint accurate. Outside of your optimal range, you might start getting some bullets that land outside of where you think you're shooting them according to your sights. So opening shot is going to tighten that cone. It's going to make it better and more accurate for a longer distance and longer range, at least for your first shot. You can see the difference at the hip crosshairs between 2 hand cannons, both with similar stability. We have the Allegro and the Dire Promise. The Allegro with opening shot active and ready for its first shot has a slightly tighter crosshair, which probably translate to a much or far bigger impact while these sights are aimed down. You can see though after the first shot is fired though, it does not reduce the amount of bloom caused by the shot. Comparing both hand cannons after firing a single shot shows either very little, I can't really tell, or no difference as it appears to me in the bloom experience from firing that first shot, which means you can expect to get the same bloom on any following shots, and you won't be experiencing really, as far as I can tell, any reduction in bloom compared to a hand cannon that does not have opening shot. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that this is a useful perk. It pretty much assures that your shot, your first initial shot, is going to maintain some better range, obviously damage at range, and combined with ricochet rounds, that's going to be really nice. You're going to be maintaining range pretty well, and you're going to maintain your accuracy. So if you're going for a headshot on that first shot, it'd probably be best to go for that so you can be pinpoint with that, get the headshot, and just clean up with the bodies to finish off the engagement. One could argue the effectiveness of this perk though, just because your first shot is usually just going to be the most accurate one anyways. If, as far as I can tell, it's not affecting any bloom patterns of following shots, then what is it really providing you with? I think it's a welcome perk. It's still a good perk because when you're facing a target that's farther away and maybe your hand cannon is going to be used as your main weapon perhaps, or your more precise or precision weapon, then yeah, it comes in, it helps and maintains damage at range better than the average shot, of course. But compared to something like explosive rounds, it's not going to maintain that much damage, I would imagine, although I'd have to test. But again, at least it's keeping that opening shot accurate. It is a similar effect to that of the Lucky Pants for the Hunter, except the Lucky Pants is a timed perk that actually allows the bloom to be reduced on any shots fired within its duration that it's active. It seems as though Slideways, the perk on the Trials weapon, seems to behave similarly, that it's a timed perk and anything fired within that time limit is affected. So I'd love to compare all three of these perks, or at least Slideways to opening shot. That'd be interesting, but that's for another video. Nonetheless, I think the combination of these two perks together on the Allegro make it quite good. These both provide quality to the weapon and provide more consistency in terms of range and in terms of accuracy. Let's talk now about some stats of the weapon. We have 45 range and 65 target acquisition, 69 stability and 86 recoil direction, 42 reload speed, 59 handling, and 9 bullets in the mag. As much as it's not the highlight feature of this weapon, 45 range isn't the highest, but ricochet rounds definitely makes up for it. Like I said earlier, compared to a minuet with nearly 10 points more range, this weapon still maintained damage at range better. So in terms of at least damage at range, this is not something you really have to worry about. Even though the stats say that it's considerably lower, it still maintains damage at range quite well, and if you really wanted to, you can increase this a bit as well to do so even more. I think the real highlight of this weapon is its 69 stability and 86 recoil direction stat. Its stability is one of the highest stability stats for any hand cannon part of the 140 RPM archetype. I think that the only hand cannon that I've seen, or one of the only hand cannons that I've seen that come close to this or rival this stability, is the Dire Promise, which is actually a part of the 150 RPM archetype, so it's hard to even compare that. I think it has a bit more stability with something like 72 when fully maxed out, but the point is here is that this has an incredibly high stability stat considering it's part of the 140 RPM archetype, and it's one of the best in that regard. To add on to that, you have a good recoil direction stat. It's not the best in the game, but it's certainly not bad. It's still very, very good. 86 is a pretty good stat for recoil direction overall. So why does stability matter now? I think that stability matters because your shots are more consistent. It seems as though, at least in my experience, when I play with a hand cannon with more stability, especially on controller, I have a less irregular recoil pattern and more likeliness to be able to hit my shots more regularly, especially when coping with something like bloom. I don't think stability reduces bloom, but I think that there's something here that has to do with the way that recoil is implemented, especially with controller, that makes it more inconsistent when you're lacking stability. To further somewhat prove this kind of a theory, Grant McKay, one of the developers of Destiny 2, said recently on Twitter that there's no additional bloom on console or controller on a PC. Controller on console is equivalent to a controller on a PC. Mouse and keyboard has a slightly different accuracy and recoil model, so there it is, the two different models, to accommodate the inputs, which results in a different bloom, but it's still there. This means that bloom still exists on PC as well, and if hand cannons are better on PC and more consistent, it seems like the main difference here is stability, and I think that when I'm using a hand cannon with high stability or good stability with a controller, it's far less inconsistent. Since bloom is confirmed to be present on both mouse and keyboard and controller, it looks like a main difference between them that might be providing more consistency is stability. Of course, all the weapons in the game with mouse and keyboard have more stability, and when increasing that and using a controller, it feels like I'm getting far less inconsistency. Of course, there's still some there because of bloom, but it feels far more reliable with less inconsistencies. Well, then you could say, well, what's stopping you from using something then like the Dire Promise or maybe another hand cannon with really high stability? Now, to my knowledge, the reason why you'd want to use this hand cannon over them is because it has ricochet rounds, which is going to maintain damage at range better. So you're not sacrificing range nearly as much with this hand cannon than you would be with something like the Dire Promise. So you're maintaining great stability, more consistency, but you're really not losing out on range nearly as much as some other hand cannons with high stability. There's no other hand cannons in the game, at least that I'm aware of, that have high stability and ricochet rounds to go along with it. So as much as this weapon has decent range and good target acquisition, not the best, but good target acquisition, it's got pretty great stability and pretty good recoil direction to go along with that. And if you're worried about the range, well, then we have ricochet rounds to make up for that. So you're getting the best of range and stability to put together. So to end the video off and end the review off, because it's getting a little longer than I would like it to be, I'll say that while no, this weapon's not going to be your Palindrome or Luna that you can just run around the map with and melt things no matter what range you're at, this weapon is considerably more consistent than a lot of hand cannons I've used, especially with controller, and just overall for you mouse and keyboard users, again, it's just a good energy hand cannon. If you're a fan of hand cannons, I really recommend trying this out. If you're a console player looking for a good hand cannon, this is definitely the one I'd recommend. Again, Dire Promise, a lot of other weapons with high stability and more consistent recoil patterns don't really maintain damage as well, except this one really does. This is just your all-around jack of all trades and does everything pretty dang well. I really enjoy using this weapon, so definitely try it out. And guys, as always, I want to hear your thoughts. Please put them down in the comments below so we can have a conversation about this weapon. Share your thoughts down there. I'd always like to hear them. And as per the usual, thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry this was a little longer, but there was a lot to talk about and probably more things to go into in other videos. But thank you for watching. It's been Drew here today, and I'll catch you guys later.